tiny island, Nova Zembla, the Soviet Union tested the most powerful thermonuclear weapon ever created, the Tsar Bomba, codename Ivan. Its powerful blast yielded an unparalleled 50 megatons, enough to annihilate anything in a 35-kilometer radius. The explosion was so powerful that the light and sound of the blast could be seen and heard from up to 900 kilometers away. The heat from the explosion was so strong that it could cause third-degree burns as far as 100 kilometers from ground zero. Its mushroom cloud could be seen from as far as 161 kilometers away. A truly horrifying spectacle. As far as powerful bombs go, the Tsar Bomba set the record for the most potent ever detonated. Except, it pales in comparison to the most powerful explosive known to mankind, with its core no bigger than a pinhead. What would happen if instead of uranium, plutonium, and hydrogen, this substance is used? Something so powerful that science fiction calls it the doomsday weapon, destroyer of planets. Hello everyone, Subject Zero here. Neutrons are subatomic particles that have neutral charge. They have slightly greater mass than protons and constitute the nuclei of atoms. They are roughly encountered in similar proportions, usually 50-50. Neutrons can only exist either by sharing space in nuclei, where the strong force helps maintain its characteristics, or with a whole lot of gravity, which is the case of a neutron star. You see, free neutrons won't last long by themselves. Typically, their half-life is about 611 seconds, or a little over 10 minutes. And in that...
Get back, I'm gonna get some Gatorade.
One single neutron releases 1 million electron volts. But
these Tootsies should be approximately
to answer this question, we first
10
need to
units
establish
long.
a comparison benchmark.
Last time I saw my big rod Tootsie.
Trinitrotoluene is a yellow solid best known for its explosion.
TNT. $14 units. So this is almost 5. You know the big thick Tootsie Rolls? This rod is about 5 of those. I had to get a butter knife in here to cut that up. Okay, I got a butter knife. We're gonna cut Tootsie Rod up into segments and sever it. See how well this butter knife can get through this Tootsie. Yep. So this is about the size of a normal thick Tootsie. Now compare it to this. That is a big Tootsie. I now call them Tootsie Rods. Oh my god, it's warm. Mm-mm. Mm. 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 Oh, it's a cheese. Oh.
So this is a sample of ruthenium sponge. So the ruthenium metal has been precipitated to form very fine particles. So here, we'll just open the box.
I'm rather ashamed that I made a big mistake about the name of ruthenium. I'm more excited by the fact that this is worth £250,000 than by the fact that it's a thermocouple. This is, I think,
Rhodium?
the first sample of metallic rhodium that I've ever held in my hands. And it's not very thick, it's just a tiny piece of foil. But I'm here at the Johnson
Stuck on my
Matthey
top of my
Metals
mouth.
processing plant, where they turn the sponge that comes from mines, the rhodium sponge, into rhodium metal. But rhodium metal is rarely used by itself. It's usually used as an alloy. And this is one of the few applications of rhodium metal where it is used as a very, very thin foil for filtering X-rays for cancer diagnosis, particularly breast cancer. This is some sort of wheel that goes round in front of the X-ray source. And one of the paddles has rhodium on it. Rhodium is almost the rarest of the metals. The world production of rhodium here is about 20 tons.
20
tons? Most of that rhodium goes into the automotive catalysts, the catalyst that you have on cars and other vehicles. And it catalyzes a really rather boring reaction,
20
but
tons.
a very important one, which is nitrogen oxides, NOx, going to nitrogen and oxygen. And without rhodium catalysts, the air quality in our cities would be much, much worse because of the car exhausts. But rhodium is used in all sorts of alloys where rhodium mixed with platinum gives so much better chemical performance. Here, for example, this is thermocouple wire, which is platinum with 13% rhodium in it, where the addition of rhodium makes it perform much better as a thermocouple. And you can see it really doesn't look very different from platinum itself, though apparently the people who work here become really tuned to the different metals and they can see subtle differences. Here is thermocouple with 30% rhodium in it, and it's all wrapped up from shipping, so you can't actually see inside. It looks like fishing line, but I'm assured that there's 30% rhodium in here. So we'll have to trust them. I've now got 6% rhodium and platinum. Though I must say, I'm more excited by the fact that this is worth £250,000 than by the fact that it's a thermocouple. But you can see, if we focus on the science, that this is a thermocouple wire for measuring temperature, weighs over 8 kilos, so that's really quite a serious weight. So this is 94% platinum and 6% rhodium. It's very heavy. I'm going to put it down, particularly because I'm not wearing reinforced shoes. So another application for rhodium platinum is in heart pacemakers. I've never seen a pacemaker before. It's not very heavy, but still quite big to go inside one's chest. So a heart pacemaker produces an electrical signal that helps people's hearts beat in a regular way. Those people who need them, if they didn't have them, their heart would tend to flutter and wouldn't pump in a nice regular way. So here, the rhodium is in these very fine wires that are inside this plastic coating. And these fine wires are the key to the whole machine. They take the electrical signals to where they're needed to make your heart work. This part here is just batteries and electronics, but it doesn't actually do anything for you. It's the electrical signals that come out of the end that are the key part. The reason it's called rhodium is because it comes from the Greek word meaning red or pink. Because when it was first discovered, William Hyde Wollaston noticed that the colour of the salts were rather striking reddish colour. In fact, he discovered palladium, and rhodium was an impurity which he only discovered when he'd already started selling palladium as a product. But he was the first person to isolate it and to give it its name. Rhodium itself looks, I think, like the other platinum metals, a silverish colour. Iridium is sometimes slightly yellow, and osmium is a rather nice bluish colour. It's the only blue metal I think there is.
Palladium is weird. It can store like hydrogen gas, I think.
A migraine hope.
It's
from
really
Ludwig
interesting.
to show up for the sweet, the hectic, the tender, the tense.
Wollaston wasn't entirely mercenary, and when he died in the 1820s, he bequeathed, that's left in his will, samples of his metals, platinum and palladium, to the Royal Society. And we still have them. Let's see what's in the box. And here you can see there is a sample that is labelled palladium. And if we look inside, imagine that you've discovered a new element. What would you do? Palladium was discovered by the chemist Wollaston. And this is what he did, as shown by this piece of paper. He made palladium and started selling it. You can see here it says palladium, the new silver. Then down here he has the price. You can buy 5 shillings, half a guinea, which is 10.5 shillings, or a guinea, which is 21 shillings. And here he gives some of the chemical properties to that what it will dissolve in, and so on. So he starts selling it, not himself. He gets a Mr. Forster to sell it on his behalf, and Forster claims he's the only person that will sell it. These were discovered by Wollaston, whose job was to refine metals, and he discovered a new metal, and if it's your business, what you do, you sell it. Makes sense. Then underneath we got a letter, and the letter was written a year later. This was 1802, this is 1803, and from somebody called Chevenix, who's furious. He thinks it's a fraud. He doesn't think it's a new metal. And here he's describing chemical tests that he's done, which shows that palladium is not a new metal. Now the problem is that Wollaston had not published a paper describing it. So Wollaston got his act together, and a couple of years later he wrote a paper, and here we've got his original paper on the discovery of palladium. So he is now describing properly for the scientific literature what is discovered. And I'm always fascinated why people choose the names for particular elements. And here in these papers they actually explain why they chose the names. In modern papers, when they discover elements, they publish the paper, and then months, perhaps years later, they actually choose the name. But here he says, I subsequently, that means afterwards, obtained another metal to which I gave the name of palladium from the planet that had been discovered nearly at the same time. There isn't a planet, as we now know, with a name that sounds like palladium, but it turns out that in 1802 they discovered a very big asteroid, which in those days they thought was a planet, and it was called Pallas. This was really fashionable and trendy. Discover an element, let's name it after the new planet. And it's much the same as people do now. When they discover something new, they give it a name that goes with the exciting things in the time. Probably everybody was really excited about a new planet, and this was just cashing in on that, especially if you're trying to sell things. But what this paper does is to show that the element was real.
You can actually find
and
palladium
he describes some of the reactions. And he made this element by dissolving up an ore, that's a rock, that was containing minerals of various noble metals, platinum and so on. And by careful precipitation, he could precipitate one metal after another. In here, got a box, and inside are 2 lumps of metal. We'll come back to these in a minute. And here you can see there is a sample that is labelled palladium. There is 2 pieces of palladium, and somebody has written something on this one. But what's interesting, he left these samples to the Royal Society to be used for science. So you can see somebody's chopped off one of these corners, must have done an experiment with it. And this piece looks a very strange shape, so lots of bits have probably been trimmed off it. And then in here, there is a inscription saying the palladium in this packet has been rolled from fused buttons. What that means is they made round pieces and they put it through rollers, so out came a continuous sheet. And you can see here, well, let's see, Wollaston wasn't entirely mercenary. Well, let's see what's inside. I haven't seen it myself. There are 2 more pieces. This one is a bit strange. Somebody's tried to get a splinter off it. There is some writing on it. This one says number 6, and somebody else has written something else on it. Now, what's really exciting about these samples is the letter or the list that I've got here. And this list is signed, if you look down here, by Michael Faraday, one of the really great chemists and physicists who's ever lived. It's a list of all the pieces of platinum and palladium that he could find in the collection of the Royal Society. What is written at the beginning is, or somebody else has written, weight of palladium 74 ounces, weight of platina, that means platinum, 45 ounces and a bit. And Faraday has written out underneath, I find only 28 ounces 420 grains of platina and 73 ounces and 373 grains of palladium at this date, the 11th of February 1834. So Michael Faraday is sort of saying somebody's pinched some of the platinum, nearly half. In the same box, as you saw, there are 2 pieces here which are of a very dense metal. They feel very heavy, which I think might be the platinum. But they're not labelled. They didn't have any paper around them, just a piece of plastic. So I think we're going to have to get somebody to do a chemical test to tell us if these really are platinum or palladium. And what is really important, that these are the samples that Michael Faraday used to do all his electrochemical experiments. And so it's really like being back in his lab.
Silver.
trouble keeping track of your team's work? You need Asana. Capture everything in one space. Assign tasks to team members, see each stage of work, and identify trouble before it starts. Try Asana today for free.
Babe, I started the car 10 minutes ago.
What? How? I don't need it. Let's go.
Remote engine start with climate control via smartphone.
Good call.
In the most comfortable...
So our reaction's ready. Now all we need again is a little bit of water just to start it off. So we're here today and we've come back after hours because we need to use this room for a long period of time. Because we're going to do something quite exciting. Because
Silver?
Brady's brought another camera, which you can see set up over there. And we're going to use that second camera to capture 1 second of film every minute for maybe 2 or 3 hours. And we're going to do some time-lapse. Something I've seen on TV with like flowers opening or plants growing, but never with chemistry developing.
Silver is one of the few metallic elements that occurs naturally as the metal in nature. So that if you're lucky, you can wander around and find lumps of silver lying around on the ground. And this is how, in ancient times, silver was discovered. So it has been known for thousands, if not tens of thousands of years. Gold is somewhat similar, and also copper. But most other metals combine too easily with oxygen or other elements, so you don't find them naturally.
So I thought what we do today is through a competition reaction. And that competition reaction is based on something called the reactivity series of metals. So we're going to compare the reactivity of two metals. It's a bit like a game of football. We're going to give one of those metals the football, and in this case, it's another component or another salt component, nitrate. So the two metals that are going to be competing for the nitrate are silver and copper. And really, these are related by something called the reactivity series. One of these metals is going to win. I know that, and I hope we'll find it during this video.
Silver had a particular use in photography, and in the old days, when people used photographic film, the black colour that you saw on developed negatives is in fact silver. A photographic film consists of a layer of silver bromide or sometimes silver iodide, and when the light shines on it, the light just starts a tiny amount of reaction to making silver, and then when you put it in the developing solution, the catalytic amount of silver that you've produced causes a big reaction, and you make a large amount of silver, and so you get this black colour, which then you can print as pictures.
So on the bench I've got a small beaker or an Erlenmeyer flask, as we chemists call it, which is full of deionized water. So we've passed the water through a machine which has taken out all of the other ions so that they can't sort of play around with the competition reaction that we want to start today. Firstly, I'm going to start off by giving the prize of the competition to silver. So here I've got a sample of silver nitrate. It's sensitive to light, so I can't leave it out in the bench very often.
Oh, I've actually dealt with that stuff, I think.
To make a silver nitrate solution.
My teacher wrapped it in
tinfoil. So I want to make sure there's plenty in there so that it's saturated. Now we've got to put in the competitor. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some copper metal. And this is just a sample of wire, which I've rubbed with some wire wool just to make it sort of nice and shiny. And now what I'm going to do is dangle it into the silver nitrate. Then it's going to start to compete for the nitrate, and we'll see what happens. So, Brady started the recording, and I think the best thing for us to do is to go away and do something a little bit more exciting, and come back and have a look in an hour.
Silver has become quite popular recently as a potential new way of making things antibacterial, killing bacteria.
So now we're going to make some flash powder, and the flash powder that we're going to make today is just a two-component mixture. It's very finely ground magnesium, and the second component is ground silver nitrate, solid. Okay, so we take these two components and we mix the two together very intimately, and Neil's just weighing the materials out right now. So we're going to put the magnesium and the silver nitrate, the two powders, together into a small plastic container here. We're going to mix them very, very carefully, and then we're going to see what happens when we sort of initiate a chemical reaction.
For hundreds of years, people have used silver spoons, partly I think because silver is quite easy to make, but also because the silver does have properties that kill bacteria, so a silver spoon was less likely to get harmful bacteria on it than if you have one that's made out of wood or horn of a cow or something like that.
So we're mixing these very carefully in the fume hood, just in case the chemistry starts before we want it to.
And in recent times, people have started making very, very fine particles of silver, so-called nanoparticles, which can exist in solution. So here I've got a solution of silver nanoparticles. You can see it doesn't look silver, it looks a bit yellow actually. And you can tell that it's got particles in it, because if I can find a torch. So here we've got particles, and you can see the particles better if we shine light through it. And if you look at the light, you can see that there is a cone of light that looks rather like the headlights of a car in fog. And this is an effect that is called a Tyndall cone, which indicates that they're very, very tiny particles suspended in the solution. So this is not silver dissolved in the water, but actually very tiny particles.
So let's start the reaction just with a little bit of water. Wow. I think we should do it again though. Oh, wow.
Yeah. People are now using these silver nanoparticles for all sorts of purposes. Here you can see that they've been put onto some sort of plastic. And you can now buy socks which have silver nanoparticles on them, which are claimed to kill the bacteria that make your feet smell.
So we're going to repeat the reaction. That's going to come out somewhere, isn't it?
Silver will conduct electricity. It will also conduct heat. If you've ever tried stirring tea with a silver spoon, it gets very hot. You tend to drop it. It also conducts electricity well.
So we're going to repeat the reaction so that you can see it again, because that was really fast. This time we're going to do it on a glass dish so you can see it a bit better. We'll pour out a small amount.
Can't wait for the boom.
So our reaction's ready. Now all we need again is a little bit of water just to start it off.
Oh my god.
I managed
Silver's
to close my eyes this time.
During the Second World War, when the US government was involved in enriching uranium as part of the Manhattan Project, they needed an enormous amount of wire to make magnets. And so a huge amount of silver was taken from the US
so sorry.
Treasury, where it was stored as silver to give
Well, now I got our answer that if you actually kill them when they have a zombie head, they'll actually get a feather too.
At least it wasn't returned at the end of the war as was promised.
Well, managed to film maybe 1 minute's worth of time by now, maybe 2. Because we've been away about 2 hours. So we're going to go back and have a look at the flask, see if there's any changes. If you remember when we left, it was a nice clear solution of silver nitrate with some copper wire, which was just immersed inside. So let's go and have a look. There's been big changes in our flask. So if you look carefully, you can see now that the copper wire itself is covered in very, very sharp crystals of silver, which have basically become deposited on the surface. Copper has now won this chemical reaction. It's now going into solution. It's taking the salt element and precipitating solid silver crystals. So if you look carefully, you can see that the colour of the solution has changed. It was colourless. Now it's blue, which tells me that there's another ion, copper, in solution.
Cadmium is next.
Get your taxes done with or without the office visit. Drop in, drop off. Send us a pic of your docs, and a tax pro will do the work. Or file online and get help if you need it. No matter how you choose to file, Block has your back.
Cadmium? Okay. Oh, yeah, that's one. What do you got? This is cool, man. So cadmium is an element which is quite similar to mercury, and the way that most people have seen cadmium is that cadmium sulfide has a very strong orange colour, and it is therefore used for dyeing things that yellow or orange. If you look around your house or your parents' house, you may easily find cast iron pot, which has cooking pot, which has nice orange sides and orange lid, and this is using cadmium sulfide as a glaze.
So this is a sample which was generated or which was used by some of our researchers in the School of Chemistry many years ago, and this is a sample of cadmium metal. Now it's very interesting because it's stored in this really quite nice box, which was perhaps a medication that somebody bought, but if we open it,
it's also, I believe, used to colour the plastic pipe that you see in the streets for gas pipes and so on. I think it's coloured with a cadmium compound. Now, in both these applications, even though that cadmium is quite poisonous, that they're so strongly fixed into the materials that it isn't a threat to people.
And we can see the lumps of the metallic cadmium. Now, I'm not going to touch the cadmium because we know about some of the issues of toxicity, but it's used very often in batteries, or it was traditionally used in batteries, and it's really important that we dispose of our batteries in a correct way.
Indium. This is a long video.
Discover Life Cuisine. Meals that fit your lifestyle. Your high-protein life. Meatless life. Gluten-free life. Even your low-carb lifestyle. Power up your day with Life Cuisine. Delicious your way.
Gums are the foundation of a healthy smile. Help restore your gums with new Crest Advanced Gum Restore. It detoxifies below the gum line to help heal gums in just 7 days.
Indium is a really fascinating material, and we're going to show you why it was called indium.
Indium is rare, and I think it's used in car
sparkers.
sparkers.
Mold things out of it, and how you can do some reactions. And Neil's going to have some real fun. Neil had quite a few samples of indium because it is a slightly poisonous element, and people give it to him rather than having to dispose of it themselves. And so he has a selection of pieces of rods and wires, and a really quite nice thick wire that was originally coiled. And he showed how you can just pull the coil apart. And even this thick wire is so bendy that when you push your hands together, it just bends with almost no effort at all.
Look, oh my God! Who's that? Still, he lives.
Indium wire. It's very, very malleable, very, very soft, and very easy to form into shapes.
But what was really nice was that he made a ball of this wire and then thumped it with a hammer. You know, Neil has a big selection of hammers and produced quite a nice flat sheet. These pieces of wire essentially cold moulded together, and as soon as I saw the sheet, I thought we should try and make an impression of a coin. So I produced a British 20-pence piece, which has a nice picture of Her Majesty the Queen, and put it on the indium.
No way.
And Neil hit it with a hammer. Of course, he hit the side with not the Queen's picture on it, out of respect. And we got a very nice impression of the Queen.
No way.
On the second attempt, it was even nicer. Though he did bend my coin. And it's really
so cool.
remarkable how much detail can be pressed into this soft metal. You can even see her earring. I didn't know the Queen wore an earring. I've never looked at her portraits in such detail. Then, because we have many viewers in the United States, we felt it was only right to do an impression of an American coin. So we chose a quarter.
Do me a favor and please look up NNA Productions. After looking up NNA Productions, you will get a strong sense to kill yourself. Oh, it's not a good hit.
Beautiful as the impression of Her Majesty. But then it was time to do slightly more serious experiments. And one of the things about indium, and the reason why I've used it in my career,
now,
is that
there's a reason.
Quite a low melting point, just about
now,
150 degrees centigrade, and it can be.
I've actually performed an observation. My video subtitles look a little bit dull. Well, put a 5 in front of that one, and I got a channel. I'm 15. So, you know what? Think about it like this. It's better to look at me. I don't scream at the top of my lungs every freaking day.
No.
What?
I just looked for Cookie. I forgot. He's weird. Okay. Anyway. I'm gonna take a quick nap. So if you can keep it down.
Yes.
So I got no sleep.
Honey.
Thanks. I farted so bad earlier, and I was like, God damn, like, what?
I don't know. Oh my god. At least I don't scam children for money, you know, right?
You know I'm playing with you, Red ID, you're streaming. Big, rank, nasty fart. Yeah. Big, rank, nasty fart.
Thank God.
I'm messing with you. Hello, Races. Stream people. Whatever they are. Okay, bye.
Fun fact, Illinois has the best dental health in the state. It's a little bit ironic, because I don't have the best dental health. No. I cannot. By the way, wait a second. You know what's weird? Is that you spelled worstest wrong and you said I was one, but you're supposed to say worst. Worstest is grammarly incorrect. And the surprising thing is, I'm not good at grammar. And I still know that worstest is not grammarly incorrect. It's not a grammarly correct word at all. So, who let you own a channel since you were one? Because you have to have a channel to there you go, leave my stream. Says, you were the worstest channel. How'd you get a channel since I was one? Hey, don't you remember you have to have a YouTube channel to comment? It's kind of weird. But the thing is, you know, you said I was one, but the funny thing is, I'm autistic and old, probably older than him. And I know how to spell worst. Yeah, you're the worstest person ever. Guys, when you bully people, don't make yourself a target. That was the worst bullying attempt I've ever seen. Like, bro, my guinea pig does better than that. God. NNA Productions is so bad. Honestly, I don't want to go on private. I don't even want to go on private on my phone and watch it, because I don't want to get recommended. You know, fine. I'm a bad YouTuber. Let me show you. Listen.
On this Sonic the Hedgehog tank, for 5 seconds, you guys have to smash the like button. Dear guys, let's do this. 3, 2, 1, let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
This dude is literally...
Was that enough data to conclude your answer? Oh my god. Well, let me see. Pretty sure that dude looks like a child. And plus, I have a right to own a YouTube channel. So do you. I'm not elite. I'm not obligated to be old enough. Well, let's see. Come on, let me see the profile picture up close. I want to see this. By the way, the last person I heard about. You look like a child. I can terminate the stream from my iPad? What? Let's see. Okay, if you have a YouTube name, do not ever pick Josh White. There's a lot of Josh White YouTube channels. Holy God. I'm still scrolling. It's kind of funny. He left because he knew he was outsmarted. Guys, yeah, you heard Josh White. It's not worst. It is worstest. You guys are all wrong. You've heard the hater. Who let you speak up like that ever since you were like, what, 3?
And once he got it out, being Neil, he couldn't resist the hammer again, and so he hammered it again, almost flat.
Again.
I'm sorry if it could go a lot better. Me. I'm the worst YouTuber ever. NA Productions, what's it called? J Station. There's Morgs. There is, Rice Gum. Eli So Cray. There's, Collins Key. Jojo Suma. That's like 6 YouTubers.
So I had a small piece of gold cutting wire left. I found in my cupboard in here, and I wanted Neil to dissolve it in this liquid.
Like, go fight up. You ain't nothing, man. You ain't nothing. I'm 15. Like, little kid, I don't think you can even drive. So, I have a permit.
However, the next experiment was really good. Many of you may think that the element indium was named after the country India. I'm here in India, in Mumbai, what used to be called Bombay. Behind me is the gateway to India, because there are lots of elements named after countries or states. Californium, gallium, germanium, and so on. But in fact, it turns out that indium was named after a colour. The colour indigo, which is the sort of violet colour that you see in rainbows. When indium was first discovered, it was discovered actually as a line in a spectrum, a violet line, before they had isolated any of the metal. So Neil decided that we should try and see this violet colour, this indigo colour. And we tried 2 experiments.
You know what? I know why you're saying that I'm the worst. Because I do not turn up the contrast on my videos. People do and make them all colorful.
It melted, and then put a blowtorch on it, that is a high temperature gas flame, and see what we could see. And there was a really nice indigo colour. Brady was really excited. Unfortunately, that was just the time I chose to go out of the room to a meeting, so I missed it.
You got it, baby. You got it.
Actually, they didn't see the colour straight away, but they had to heat the indium pretty hard, and then the colour appeared. I think the reason.
Oh wait, yeah, right. Local Ball 2, Team 10. They're all bad. Team 10 is like 10 people that are absolute mother-effing morons.
The indium up to a very high temperature.
Team 10.
Once it is in the gas
Team
phase,
10 local
it is hot enough.
NNA Productions, Eli so great, and Kolinsky, Joseph Sumala, and I think not say NNA Productions, they're all bad.
It is a characteristic of indium that because of the energy levels that the light comes out with this very characteristic violet indigo colour, which other elements
You know, I know it's weird, I might not be, I'm sorry, but I want to travel on the roads.
German discoverers of the element to notice that there was something unusual, this unusual line. Then I suggested that Neil should try dissolving indium in bromine. The reason being that most indium salts are colourless, and bromine is red, so I thought it would look nicer on the video. It looked nice, but the indium didn't dissolve, so it was a bit of a disappointing experiment. So it was good I wasn't there. But Neil is a huge believer in nitric acid to dissolve almost anything except gold. So he poured concentrated nitric acid on the indium and was not disappointed. Great bubblings, bubbles of NO2, the brown gas, and the indium at least partly dissolved. The indium is dissolving and making indium nitrate. That's indium 3+ ions and NO3- ions. We never isolated the indium nitrate, but because I hadn't been there, Neil thought he would try and show me the colour again. This time he took some wooden splints, these are just very thin bits of wood, and dipped it into the nitric acid solution, which now contained indium ions, and put that in the flame, and you could see the nice...
I know it's weird, but horses are supposed to kind of represent cars.
I'd never seen that before, and so it was really quite an exciting first. I still think the purple colour of plutonium-3 salts are nicer, but we can't do plutonium in Neil's lab.
So cool how you can almost get lost.
So indium is a
Man,
good
I'm starting to almost not be able to find my way. I think I took a left. I need to find a way to get out of it. Man, it's so cool you can just get lost in this, all these roads.
After its many coloured salts, rather like the English word iridescence. And I believe that rhodium is also named after the red colour of one of its salts. And I'm sure our viewers will remind me of lots of other elements that are named after colours, but I can't think of any immediately. There's a really important use for indium, which is in almost any sort of computer display screen, which consists of liquid crystals or some similar material sandwiched between two pieces of glass. Obviously, you have to be able to see through the glass or you won't see the display, but the glass, the inside surface of the glass has to conduct electricity, otherwise you cannot activate the pixels. So what happens is that the glass is coated with a material called indium tin oxide. I sent emails all over the university to try and find a sample of glass with indium tin oxide. And then Neil said, I've got a big piece. So I needn't have bothered, I could have just asked Neil. What you see is there's a sheet of glass which has a thin coating of indium tin oxide on one side and not on the other. If you take a meter that measures electrical resistance, you can see that on the glass side it doesn't conduct electricity at all, but on the other side where there's the indium tin oxide, as you move the probes of the meter apart, you can see the resistance goes up and down, and it does conduct electricity. It doesn't conduct it terribly well, but it's transparent and it does conduct enough for display.
Right.
There is quite a serious problem in terms of sustainability. Where are the computer screens going to come for your children, your grandchildren, because the supplies of indium are beginning to run out. So it's really very important that when you finish with your LCD screen, when you finish with your computer, your smartphone, you should get it recycled so people can begin to reclaim these elements. Or you may find that when you get to your iPhone 20 or iPhone 30, there won't be enough indium to be put on the screens.
Obviously, we try to bring you as much chemistry as possible here in our videos, but if you really want to fill your boots, why not check out the Great Courses Plus? Have a look at this. 60 half-hour lessons with a Georgetown University expert, all about chemistry. Everything's here. Essentially, it's guiding you through a full college-level chemistry curriculum. And this is just one of an ever-growing library of courses they have, covering all sorts of subjects. You name it, they're going to have it. No tests, no homework, just lots of knowledge. You can do them on your computer, tablet, phone, whatever. For a free trial, go to thegreatcoursesplus.com/periodic videos, so they know you came from here. Should be on the screen, down in the description. Check them out, people, and our thanks to them for supporting this video.
People were afraid I was contagious. I felt gross.
It was kind of a shock after I started Cosentyx. 4 years clear.
Real people with psoriasis look and feel better with Cosentyx. Don't use it if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur. Tell your doctor about an infection or symptoms. If your inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen, or if you've had a vaccine or plan to, serious allergic reactions may occur. Learn more at Cosentyx.com.
And now more Straight Talk from Straight Talk. The big wireless companies will tell you they're the only way to get the best networks. Not true. Straight Talk Wireless runs on those same cell towers, which means you get the same great networks for up to 50% less. Straight Talk Wireless, no contract, no compromise.
Brady thought that tin was a really boring element. but
Oh
we've
yeah, right,
changed
this
his mind.
hospital.
Shown him that it does more than it says on the tin. What we're going to show you is
I love this
how
hospital.
tin melts, how you can join wires on the battlefield while you're being fired at by the enemy, how you can stop things growing on the bottom of ships, and also give you a few hints about our first year chemistry course if you come here to the university. Tin is in group 14, the same group as carbon, so it is below germanium and above lead. It was really valuable in prehistoric times
Oh, I get when you're
because
approaching to the
it was
lodge.
found that when you mix it with copper, you could make bronze, and
This actually
bronze
is a natural
melts
reserve.
at a lower temperature than copper, so it's easier to make weapons, and the weapons were harder. Tin is found in a variety of minerals. There are large sources of it in China, in Malaysia, and also in Cornwall, in the west of England.
After the ore has been crushed and washed, the tin oxide is dried and samples tested for quality. A good sample should yield 140 pounds of tin from a ton of ore.
There are still many abandoned tin mines in Cornwall. They're quite dangerous when you walk across the moors. There are open shafts which, if you're not looking where you're going, you can fall down.
Eventually, Cornwall could provide a third of all the tin required by this country.
We have been trying to look at tin, beginning with the metal. One of the interesting things about tin is that it melts at quite a low temperature. So if you heat it up, it melts around 230 degrees centigrade. So even with a gas torch, you can melt it quite easily in a glass test tube. This low melting point is very useful for a whole series of applications, particularly for so-called solder, that is, joining things electrically. This is solder. It is the metal which is used to make electrical connections, in this case on a very old computer memory board. Now, to make joints like this requires precise tools, and it's a bit boring. But what we want to show you is how people joined wires together on the battlefield. For example, in the Second World War. You've got to imagine you're on the battlefield, people are shooting at you. You need to put down the telephone wires so you can talk to the groups on either side of you. And the last thing you want to do is to get out a soldering iron and wait for it to heat up and so on. I remembered that I had some self-soldering joints which I got when I was an army cadet, when I was about 15. There's a copper tube with some solder inside and some material that burns so that you can light it like a match. So you take the two bits of electrical wire you want to join, post one piece of wire on each end, and then you light it. The solder is inside. I've had these 56 years, and they weren't new when they got them, so they probably come from the Second World War. They're probably surplus. I thought they would work. Neil was a bit dubious. As usual, I was right. So Neil set fire to the red part, which is some sort of igniting mixture, and it flared up quite quickly, and then you can see the whole tube gets very hot. Now, of course, you can't see the solder because that's inside, but as it gets hot, the solder melts and runs around the wires, and then as it cools down, it solidifies, fixing the wires into this short piece of copper tube. On one occasion, we did it more than once, you could see the solder coming out just on one side.
Oh, there's so many cats.
Just to show that the solder was in there, I persuaded Neil and our new assistant, Connor, who's joining our team, to heat one of these pieces vertically so that when the solder melts, it will drop out to the bottom. just to show you that it got hot, we put a thermocouple, which measures temperature, into the top. So you can see the temperature going up and you can see the solder running out. So we were really quite excited. Then we thought tin is in the same group as carbon. Carbon burns, so perhaps tin will burn well in a Bunsen. We found some very nice, finely powdered tin. Neil started sprinkling the tin into the flame of the Bunsen burner, and it was really beautiful.
Wow.
You could see all sorts of swirling flames. And when the tin went into the flame, you got quite a bright coloured light. Now, there's some argument whether it was violet or lilac, but there was a touch of green as well, which I think came off his spatula. It was really much more beautiful than any of us had expected. And then Neil had a really good idea. He fed the powder into the air hole of the Bunsen burner. The stream of gas then blew the powder up into the flame, and that looked even better. So we'd had two really good experiments, demonstrations, and so we felt really ready to go for a third. Now, tin is very well known of having two different forms of the metal. One of them is shiny and looks just like any other metal. The other one is meant to be a sort of brownish colour and crumbles away. This transition between the two happens at low temperature. And I'd seen a terrific time-lapse video on YouTube where you can see a block of metallic tin gradually crumbling away as this so-called tin pest spreads across. So we thought we would try the same. But perhaps we were not quite so patient. So, first of all, I had a nice tin soldier, and we tried dunking the soldier in liquid nitrogen. It came out looking much the same, but we hoped it had transformed inside. So Neil thumped it with a hammer. That was successful. It shattered to bits, but there was absolutely no evidence that the metal had changed. It was just Neil's power that smashed it. So we then tried a different experiment, melting the tin and pouring the molten tin, the liquid tin, into liquid nitrogen. The thinking here was that if we froze the liquid quickly, it would go into the unstable form directly without going through the metallic one. So it was really quite spectacular. When it went in, there were great plumes of vapour, water vapour, as the nitrogen evaporated. And when we took it out, it was a rather beautiful shape of long piece of tin. But it was the shape of the test tube, so it looked quite artistic. But it didn't demonstrate what we wanted. We thought perhaps we were being a bit impatient, so we left it in liquid nitrogen overnight on a piece of string in case it crumbled away. And sadly, when we took it out the next day, still hadn't transformed. For once, we've been completely unsuccessful. I think that when we've done it at too low a temperature. You probably need it a bit below freezing point of water, so -10, -20 degrees centigrade. And when it's really cold, liquid nitrogen temperature,
really fancy,
the atoms don't have enough thermal energy to rearrange. If we left it in liquid nitrogen for a couple of years, perhaps something would happen. So as well as bronze, there's a very well-known alloy of tin called pewter. Originally it was tin and lead. It's now tin with other metals. It's particularly famous in Malaysia. You get many souvenirs. And when I was in Malaysia, I was given this plate made out of pewter. And the reason why people like it is because you can melt it quite easily and make it into elaborate shapes like the pattern on this plate. Now, we really haven't talked about the chemistry yet. Tin is in the same group as carbon, so it has 4 electrons in the outer shell. But unlike carbon, it can either use 2 of these electrons or 4 of these electrons for bonding. When it uses 2 electrons, it forms, say, tin dichloride, stannous chloride, which is a salt, rather like sodium chloride. So it dissolves in water, makes a slightly cloudy mixture if you put too much in, but it dissolves. But it will not dissolve in organic solvents like cyclohexane. On the other hand, if you use 4 electrons, you can make compounds like tin tetraiodide, which is one of the compounds our students make in the first year lab. And we had 2 samples made by students, and you can see the colours are a bit different because one made a purer sample than the other. The tin tetraiodide is like an organic compound. If you put this one in water, the tin iodine bonds react with the water, so you get hydrogen iodide, which you can't see, and you get a precipitate of tin oxide, which is white. If you put it in an organic solvent, it dissolves, so you get a nice yellow solution. I won't say any more, or you might cheat when you're a student here. Tin oxides are important in screens on smartphones and similar things because this display consists of a material which is sandwiched between 2 electrodes. And obviously the electrode through which you're looking has to be transparent. And indium tin oxide, that's a mixed oxide of indium and tin, is electrically conducting but is transparent. So indium tin oxide is a key component of most smartphones and other displays. So if you're watching this, you're probably watching it through a thin film of indium tin oxide. The final application of tin that I want to tell you about involves ships. This is a wooden ship, but it's the only one I could find. When a ship is made, obviously the bottom of the ship is absolutely clean. But as it sails around the seas, various marine organisms, mussels, barnacles and so on, fix themselves to the bottom of the ship and start growing. So eventually the bottom of the ship looks rather like my hair, with covered in these marine organisms, and this greatly slows down the ship. It doesn't go through the water so easily. So for centuries, people have tried different sorts of coating on the bottom of ships for so-called anti-fouling, to stop organisms growing on them. A very successful method is involved using organo-tin compounds, usually derivatives of tributyl tin. These are very effective in preventing growth on the bottom of the ship. The problem is that the tin can leach, dissolve off the bottom of the ship, and particularly near ports, because there are a lot of ships there and they spend quite a lot of the time there. And when the tin comes out, of course, it stops the organisms, the barnacles, fixing onto rocks and all sorts of things. So in recent years, there's been quite a strong movement to stop using tin in anti-fouling paints and to use clever paint chemistry to make the bottom so smooth that nothing can stick to it.
There you go, and to think I thought a video about tin would be boring. As you probably know, we've made...
Grammarly does more than catch errors. With Grammarly, you can find really...
You're back.
Hello.
Hey, Beer Pep. Antimony is next. I got this question wrong, and I thought it was AN, but it was actually SB. Very weird.
Antimony. So here we have antimony. Okay, antimony, you can see through the bottle, is a really quite nice metallic element.
So antimony is in the same group as arsenic and is a rather silvery metal that looks like arsenic. It is used quite widely in the electronics industry. Usually it is put into electronics by taking the hydrogen compound, SbH3, stibine, and decomposing it, and you get a film of antimony plus hydrogen which goes away.
I'm not actually going to take it out of this bottle though, because there are some severe or some really quite damaging toxicological problems. So it's safely contained inside the bottle in this seal. But we see a wonderful sample of antimony there. It's about 50 grams of antimony in that very small bottle. I could get into a lot of trouble with that. That's evil stuff.
Antimony is also used in mixtures with indium to make indium antimonide, which is quite an interesting semiconductor material, which can be used in transistors and the like. And antimony also has quite an important role with its compounds as a catalyst in making the so-called CFCs, the compounds that are in refrigerators and which caused such a scare, environmental scare, in the 1970s and 80s, because CFCs, when they get into the atmosphere, can destroy the ozone layer and cause skin cancer and so on.
Tellurium. Tellurium, I think, smells, and it's really good for industrial application.
10 years ago, we found a Loan Depot because we were confident we could deliver the American dream of home ownership to individuals and families across the nation.
Serving more than 27,000 customers a month, lowering payments, providing jobs, and investing in neighborhoods and communities nationwide.
We know what it means to...
Tellurium is quite a nice element here. I shall pick it up carefully.
Tellurium.
You've never had anything to do with this?
Nothing to do with it in my life. So this is a new one for me. This is tellurium powder. So let's see what's inside the vial. So you open it and tap out the glass vial. This one's going to be stubborn.
This bell-shaped here is a sample of tellurium. The reason... Shall I hold it for you? Yes. So a sample of tellurium. Yeah. I'm slightly cagey about touching this because, as I think I explained with selenium,
Huh. How so? Oh, maybe it could be a berry. Yep, there he is.
that if you ingest tellurium into the body, it can get into your sweat and make you smell enough to really drive people mad. And these crystals like this one can be cut up and mounted into a piece of apparatus like this.
So a chemist won't deal with all the elements on the periodic table in his career normally?
No. Very few chemists will deal with more than perhaps a handful of different elements. So this is the tellurium, and this is very high standard material. 3 grams of the tellurium material, and you can see it's a very dark powder at the bottom of the vial.
It was used in this piece of apparatus to shine in an infrared laser that's like a heat ray at one frequency, and it came out as twice the frequency, so you can use it to change the effect of the lasers. Unfortunately, the guy doing it didn't make a very good job of it, and you can see he's completely burnt the surface of this piece of tellurium. So the main use of tellurium is as components like this for laser optics, and it's not widely used in chemical industry or similar areas.
Iodine. Iodine is really common.
Ready, set,
go. Iodine is really good. Is really good anti-infectant. Or this, or she's a disinfectant.
in the larger than life
And it does really good for voicing Adam's apples or voice boxes. But iodine is really bad when you get it on your clothes because it stains.
See your Central Illinois.
Oh, that's beautiful purple.
So now you can see the reaction's really going, and it's really exothermic. We're forming aluminium triiodide, and the exotherm is actually heating and
seen this
starting to
reaction
sublime
at
off
school.
the excess iodine, which you can see coming off as this really nice purple plume.
Iodine is a beautifully coloured element. It has this beautiful purple colour. If you put it in solution, the colour of the solution varies depending what you dissolve it in. If you dissolve it in water, it's a sort of dirty brown colour. If you dissolve it in an organic material like chloroform or carbon tetrachloride, it is a beautiful purple colour.
Iodine is a halide, a halogen element from the far right-hand side of the periodic table, and it's strongly oxidizing in nature. It likes to nick electrons off other atoms. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a reaction with iodine, and today we've ground some iodine, so it's normally found from chemical suppliers as really nice large crystals. But what we want to do is a reaction with it where we need to make sure that the surface area of the iodine is really, really large, so that all of it can react very, very quickly with the other component.
Iodine also occurs quite widely in nature and is absolutely essential to life. Development of all sorts of things in your body doesn't operate properly. Nowadays, iodide is added to table salt in countries like the UK and most other developed countries, so nearly everybody has enough iodine. In the old days, iodine had to be got from the environment, and usually from the spray from the sea that was blown across the land. And so in Nottingham, which is really near the centre of England, a long way from the sea, or relatively long way from the sea, there were serious illnesses caused by people not having enough iodine, so-called goiter, which caused a swelling. The thyroid gland gets bigger, and this used to be called Derbyshire neck, this unpleasant illness, because it happened in this area of Nottingham and Derbyshire.
So what we're going to do is we're going to mix it now with another element, and that element is aluminium. So aluminium, electrons either way. Iodine's going to nab them. You're going to see some oxidation chemistry and the formation of a new compound, which is
looks like Simon.
It's a really nice chemical reaction.
My aunt's cat.
The way that we do
Simon.
it is we mix the two together, and then we have to
love
add water.
Simon.
It's a bit like a solvent, but also the oxygen in the water
Hi, buddy.
activates the iodine so that it becomes more strongly oxidizing.
There you go.
Hopefully we'll see the new reaction. So I'm just going to put some out into this small vessel.
You can see this development effect of iodine really well, that if you have tadpoles, baby frogs, they don't develop their legs and turn into frogs unless there is iodine in the water.
The other component in this reaction is aluminium, okay? And we're using very, very finely powdered aluminium, not foil or not a rather large lump. This has been specially powdered for us, so again it has a very, very high surface area.
One of my favourite chemical equations is tadpoles plus iodine goes to frogs.
So you can see the aluminium and the iodine mixed within this solid mixture. Now still, these two components, these two elements, they're still held away from one another. They can't react. So what we need to do is add a small amount of water, which acts a bit like a solvent, but it also activates the iodine, and then we'll wait and see what happens with the chemical reaction.
Iodine can be used as a disinfectant. In fact, chlorine can be as well.
A disinfectant.
But solution of iodine is often used when people have cuts. So if you cut yourself, unfortunately I haven't any cuts at the moment, you can paint on iodine, and because of its rather red colour, it made cuts often look much worse. Children would come home from school and their whole hand would be red, and this would cause some excitement at home. But it is quite an effective antiseptic.
Water? Just take a small amount and add it to the reaction. So you can see it's starting to go now, the chemical reaction, because we're seeing the excess iodine subliming and forming a vapour. Now if we go in close, we can hear it fizzing, because this is actually the oxidation reaction and the formation of the new aluminium triiodide. Now, I'm going to just mix this slightly to try and increase the rate of the chemical reaction slightly. So now you can see the reaction's really going, and it's really exothermic. We're forming aluminium triiodide, and the exotherm is actually heating and starting to sublime off the excess iodine, which you can see coming off as this really nice purple plume. Now deep inside the reaction, now you can see the exothermic, or the energy coming out and starting to cause a flame. Really, really nice, very, very rapid chemical reaction. Really beautiful. So we're forming aluminium triiodide here, which again is a very, very delicate compound, quite reactive in itself. But you can see now the really nice new crystalline material. So, sadly, we've managed to stain the Stig's fume cupboard. All of this really nice iodine forming a very fine layer across this fume hood.
What do you think about that?
Xenon, another noble gas.
Joint pain, swelling, tenderness.
My psoriasis. Cosentix works on all of this.
Cosentix can help you look and feel better by treating the multiple symptoms of psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentix.
2 days ago, I got an email sadly announcing the death of Neil Bartlett, who's the scientist who's probably done most for the chemistry of xenon since it was first discovered at the end of the 19th century.
So in the balloon, we've got a sample of xenon. Now xenon's one of the inert gases, but it's one of the inert gases that's right the way down the bottom of the period, so it's really, really dense. So what that means is that the gas molecules themselves are really, really large, really, really heavy, so in principle they'll sink.
Neil Bartlett discovered that xenon, which everyone had thought was a completely inert element, really could form reactions and could form compounds, something that nobody. And this took place in the early 1960s. And I've got a picture here of his iconic experiment. He did his experiment, I think, in late 1962, or perhaps early 63, and this was published just over a year later. And these are two pictures. This is the experiment before and after.
So we've done an experiment here, and we filled this balloon with xenon. Now xenon's very expensive, so there's about £40 worth of xenon in this balloon right now, yeah? So we're going to do this experiment, and we're going to see if it sinks. And I think you'll agree that it does sink quite quickly.
What he did was he took a glass bulb of a compound of platinum hexafluoride, PTF6, which is a gas. Now, that's quite unusual to have a metal compound that's a gas, but it's rather a nice bright orange gas. And he put together a piece of equipment here where, in this tube here, there is xenon gas, which is colourless, and this is a magnet which can be lifted up and break a tiny seal so that the two gases can mix.
But just to show you how dense it is, we've got a similar balloon. But you'll notice that this balloon is much, much higher filled, so it's much, much bigger. Now this is one that we've just blown up with air, so...
Now what had happened was before this experiment was done with xenon,
I think xenon's like one of the only,
had discovered that
one of the only, if not the only element that has
oxygen in
X
air
in the symbol.
to form a compound in which one electron had been removed from the oxygen to make O2+. And this was a solid material. It was itself quite a surprising reaction. Now, what Neil did was that he looked at the periodic table and wondered which other elements required about the same amount of energy as oxygen to remove one electron. And he came up with xenon. So he tried this experiment using the apparatus here. They lifted this magnet, or he lifted this magnet, it crashed down, the xenon rushed in, And suddenly this red gas was turned into a yellow solid. In fact, it turned out he was doing this experiment with his student, but the student, whose name I've forgotten, had to go home. So Neil did this experiment by himself, and he was very late getting home for his dinner, and his wife, according to him on this video, was really very angry. But chemistry had been transformed. Well, this experiment was voted by American chemists as one of the top 10 most important chemical experiments that had been done in the 20th century.
So let's see if we can compare the rates at which these two balloons will sink, so we can look at the comparative densities. Ready?
Xenon exists in the air, and when people liquefy air, they first of all separate the nitrogen and then the oxygen and at the end they're left with the noble gases argon, krypton and xenon. So it is made from the air. And one of the problems with this price rise of xenon was that at the same time as there was a bigger demand for xenon, there was a downturn in the steel-making industry, which uses a lot of oxygen. So the chemical plants that were, or the refrigeration plants that were making oxygen were switched off, so there was a smaller supply of xenon.
Whoa! That'll be the air.
This is an old-fashioned xenon lamp. The xenon in its bulb, and you put a large voltage through here, and the xenon gets very hot and shines out as a very bright light. It looks black here because the electrodes get so hot that the metal has evaporated, but xenon itself is colourless. This is a more modern xenon lamp, of the sort of lamp that is used in very powerful spotlights, for example, on tanks to illuminate, that's military tanks, to illuminate the target. And the window here is made of aluminium oxide, and all the light comes out as a really very powerful beam.
Cesium or cesium.
When it comes to safe travel, Greyhound has you covered, from the big city to the heart of Illinois. Bloomington is home to world-class golf and is just one of the stops along the way. With our enhanced cleaning and sanitation process and face covering requirements, your safety is our priority. Click here for stops and times.
If you remember back to the last cesium video, Pete and Neil tried to launch a bit of cesium metal into water with the small metallic collider. And they had a few problems
cesium
with
is reactive.
this area, and the cesium still being stuck in the glass as well. What I've been asked to do today is take this ampule of cesium into this piece of machinery here, which is one of our glove boxes, try and get it out of the glass so that we can put it in as is.
This
cesium has quite a surprising use. It's used to measure time. I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but you could define 1 second as a fraction of a day. 1/60th of a minute, which is a 60th of an hour, which is then a 24th of a day. But the trouble with that is that you'd never be able to tell whether the Earth was going slower or speeding up, because the length of the day would change and you wouldn't notice it. So scientists have to have an independent way of defining the second, and this is where cesium comes in.
And so now here the cesium is going in as well. Right, so we'll shut the port door.
So the way that physicists define the second is in terms of microwaves and the frequency of the microwaves. We need a standard, something that can define a radio wave very, very precisely, and this is where cesium comes in.
So what I need to do now is open up this door here.
The point about cesium is that it's a big atom. It can absorb microwaves. The absorption of the microwave causes an electron to move from one energy level to another.
Producing light.
The advantage of cesium over all other materials is that this frequency is enormously precise.
It's pretty cool. It's really good. It's kind of, I don't know, a sort of really pale gold colour. It's still molten at the moment.
It's rather like tuning a radio. I don't know if you've ever tuned a radio, but as you turn the knob, sometimes you don't have to be very precise. You can put it almost anywhere and you get your favourite station. But there are some stations where you have to adjust it very, very accurately, and there's just one tiny place where you can get the right radio station. And cesium is like that. It defines the frequency very, very accurately. If you don't hit it right, it doesn't absorb the radio waves. And so you can use it as a standard to make sure that everybody has exactly the same frequency of their microwaves. And then once everybody's got the same, then it's quite easy for everybody to agree that they will count a certain number of waves as being a second.
We're going to store the cesium under oil so that it doesn't react with air when it comes out. So this is ready now for Pete to chuck it in some water. And we all stand very far back when he does it.
So we've got
boy.
cesium, we've taken it out of the ampule. Neil did that the other day with Debbie
it's
in a
about to
glove
get
box.
violent.
They put it into a small plastic
Cesium's
wave
an alkaline. It's gonna, when that hits that water, it's gonna make a boom. My teacher said that cesium is very, very violent when it
Lift it
hits
out with a
water.
piece of string to drop it into some water. I've got my friend, Dr. Red. It's always good to be very, very careful when you do chemistry like this. So just in case something goes wrong, we have the safety procedures ready for us in case we get surprised. So now Neil's going to pass a piece of string through the hole so that we can put it on the end of a rather long fishing line so that we can drop it into water. So this is Neil's new device. It's a very, very fancy erection. Essentially we've used a laboratory stand and we have an eyelet. So this is just to act as a point with which we can raise up our cesium on a piece of string. At the moment, the cesium, you can see the lovely gold colour. Did you believe me? It's melting. Look at it. Oh yeah, it's very warm here today and the cesium's melted. So we're just going to try and freeze it again. Well, we're going to try and refreeze the cesium by cooling it with liquid nitrogen. Okay, everybody, be careful. So we have our cesium under oil. We now need to lift it up using the new device and then drop it in the water. And let's see what sort of chemical reaction it does today. Everybody ready?
Oh, yes.
Neil?
Yo!
Well, quite a spectacular reaction. As the cesium reacted with the water, gave away its electron, off she goes as cesium plus.
Awesome. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's great. You know, when Debbie and Neil took the cesium out of the ampule, they were really, really good for us because they gave us a really large surface area so it could react quickly as soon as it went in the water, generating all that lovely hydrogen ready to explode and make a bang. Great. Good chemistry.
Well, the reason that cesium reacts so violently is that it is a very large atom. So an electron can be removed very easily. In fact, if you dissolve cesium in water, on a very short time scale, a millionth of a second or so, it dissociates into cesium plus and an electron. And the energy of the electron interacting with the water is enough to separate the two. And once the electron is in the water, it then reacts with the water so that H2O dissociates into a hydrogen atom and OH minus. So in fact what you're making is a cesium salt, which is rather like caustic soda. It's a strong alkali.
In fact,
hydrogen.
Yeah. Aww. I'm gonna go in stream. I'm going to go eat dinner. Lunch.